Welcome to Acton in Focus. I'm Vivian Kobusingye Birchall, your host. This episode is a feature of the Acton Housing Authority, and we'll be speaking to a few people who are always behind the scenes at the Housing Authority to tell us more about what they do and how they do it. And to start, with me is one of the commissioners of the Acton Housing Authority, Mr. Peter Berry. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Vivian. We're happy to have this opportunity to speak to your viewers.
Yes, and to start, Mr. Berry, what is the history of the Acton Housing Authority? How did it come about, and what is it about?
Thank you again. The Acton Housing Authority is an independent public authority separate from town government, created by and charged under state law with developing, owning, and operating rental apartments for low and very low income families, elderly, veterans, and disabled individuals. The authority provides affordable housing to about 600 of the poorest residents of Acton and the surrounding communities. The Housing Authority is governed by 5 commissioners, 3 of whom are independently elected by Acton's voters on the annual town ballot, and 1 is appointed by the governor, and we also have a tenant representative on the Board of Commissioners. That person was appointed by the Select Board recently. The commissioners bring a wealth of experience working on affordable housing issues. Bob Willitsey is the chair of the commission. Bob is Governor Baker's appointment to the Board of Commissioners. A member of the greatest generation, Bob was lucky to survive fighting in the Battle of the Bulge. And following the war, Bob went on to become nationally renowned as an expert in developing housing for low and moderate income families and individuals. Bob rehabilitated and developed thousands of affordable housing units in Boston, South End, and beyond. Nancy Kolb is the board's vice chair. Nancy worked as an educator for 36 years, 33 years at Acton AB's regional district as a teacher, principal, and 15 years in the central office position of Director of Pupil Services. Nancy has also taken on responsibility as president of the Dolly Atamian Campership Program, an all-volunteer nonprofit which funds local children's summer camps and activities for low-income children. Bernice Barron is the board's treasurer. A commissioner for 20 years, Bernice's entire family has dedicated themselves to social work. Bernice was the director of 2 mental health clinics, the first in Malden for family services in Greater Boston, and for the mental health clinic at the Home for Little Wanderers in Boston. I'm the secretary to the board. I first began working on affordable housing and civil rights issues in 1973 as an attorney for Greater Boston Legal Services in Dorchester. I also have worked in part of my career as general counsel for the Cambridge and Boston Housing Authorities. Melissa Wingfield is the commissioner representing the Housing Authority's residents. Melissa is a disabled individual who has lived for 21 years in an Acton condominium, and the Housing Authority pays a portion of Melissa's rent to her private landlord. Kelley Cronin has been the authority's executive director for 16 years. In her past life, while running the Boston Emergency Shelter Commission, Kelley received the Red Cross Clara Barton Humanitarian of the Year Award. The Boston Management Consortium awarded Kelley for managing a healthier city, and she also received an award from HUD for Best Homeless Continuum of Care in the country. Recently, the Massachusetts branch of the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials gave Kelley their Member of the Year Award for her public housing advocacy efforts. So let me just, for people who aren't familiar with the history of public housing, tell you a little bit where it came from and how we got here. The federal government first started building housing for low-income individuals as part of FDR's New Deal in the 1930s. Originally, it was as much a program to help out the construction industry with jobs as it was for providing housing for low-income families. It was originally a self-sufficient program, so that rents were set at a rate which carried the operating and maintenance costs of the housing authorities. And it was intended to be a short term so that families, once they got back on their feet and improved their situation, would move out and new families would move in. Following the war, with all the veterans coming back from the Second World War, the program greatly expanded. And the state of Massachusetts also started a program, one of the only 3 in the country, for building affordable housing for low-income families and individuals. In the 1960s, Senator Ed Brooke, senator from Massachusetts, Republican, passed the Brooke Amendment, what's known as the Brooke Amendment, which capped rents for public housing residents at 30% of their income. So that required an additional appropriations to subsidize the difference between the rents and what the ongoing operating costs were for local housing authorities. So the biggest obstacle to the housing authorities' ability to rehabilitate their 50-year-old apartments is a lack of adequate funding. The revenue is from tenant rents, which are capped again at 30% of adjusted income, is supplemented by state and federal funds to make up the difference between the rental income and the ongoing operating and maintenance costs. Although Massachusetts is one of the few states that funds low-income housing, funds for capital costs are appropriated on a year-to-year basis, and the funding to provide capital improvements is chronically too low. Town meetings voters have also supported the Housing Authority, approving Community Preservation Fund grants for capital upgrades. Unfortunately, like all government institutions, the public housing program has a sordid record with regard to racial justice. The original Works Progress Administration public housing program was de facto segregated, and developments were built exclusively for white and minority populations. The Boston Housing Authority wasn't desegregated until the early 1990s due to an NAACP lawsuit. Although intentional racial discrimination no longer exists in the Acton Housing Authority, the commissioners and staff do recognize that implicit bias exists throughout society. The commissioners and staff are committed to examining the AHA's policies and operations, as well as our own individual consciousness, to eliminate the effects of that unconscious bias has to the extent possible. The AHA affirmatively promotes diversity. The AHA's demographics prove this fact. The Acton Housing Authority provides services to a diverse population and employs a diverse workforce. 52% of the units developed under state and local programs are occupied by people of color. 57% of the Housing Authority's employees are members of a minority race. AHA residents have many different countries of origin, including India, Uganda, Russia, Vietnam, China, Iran, Iraq, Kenya, Brazil, Guatemala, the Dominican Republic, and Pakistan, and speak many different languages. While high housing prices in the suburbs exclude many people of color from living in Acton, the low-income residents of the authority's properties have access to the numerous other benefits Acton offers to adults and children, including access to the AB schools, which provides a myriad of opportunities for our residents to improve their lives. So thanks again.
How can we support the Housing Authority to continue providing or filling in the gaps for this demand? And maybe, I don't know whether you want to speak to the statistics of the number of applicants you receive a year, or I could leave that for Kelley, but I don't know. Is there?
Yeah, I think that Kelley can speak more directly to the way applications are taking and how units are filled. Mm-hmm. I think from the commissioner's perspective, increasing the number of units that we have available to people in Acton is one of our main priorities. Mm-hmm. Right now, with the assistance of the town, we are developing 40 units of new affordable housing for elderly individuals on Main Street on the old Kennedy landscaping lot in Acton. The lack of open space or space to build additional affordable housing properties is a big obstacle to increasing the number of units that the Housing Authority has.
And how can that be resolved? As a person who has lived in this town for many, many years, who has been a part of the local government, what are some suggestions that you can give for this to be addressed?
Well, the town has been helpful in making town-owned properties available. We also, the Housing Authority, built 12 units of family housing on Sachem Way, which I understand you're going to visit, on property that the Housing Authority owned and was able to develop. We've been looking for solutions to that problem for a long time. Land is so expensive, it makes it very hard to put together the financing you need to build new affordable housing. The financing has changed. In the 80s, the Reagan administration cut back on appropriations for development of new affordable housing properties. So now it mostly depends on low-income tax credits, which gets wealthy investors to invest in affordable housing projects, and they get credits on their tax returns. But it takes putting together lots of different pots of money to try to develop new affordable housing. The town helps when the Acton Community Housing Corporation works on moderate rate ownership programs. They have encouraged developers to sell some of those units to the Housing Authority, so we are able to put tenants into those developments and pay the portion of their rent. But it's always a struggle to try to continue to provide the kind of services that, from my own personal perspective about Acton excluding people of color, there's been a lot of studies recently that have talked about, not so recently, but more focused more recently, I think, on single-family zoning that drives up prices in town so much and requires such minimum lot sizes that it's harder to build multifamily housing. And there's just also a lot of opposition for multifamily housing going into residential neighborhoods. And that's always a struggle to try to overcome. Like anything else, I think it's a progressive thing that people just continue to need to work on and try to fight for, opening up more opportunities for low-income people to live in Acton.
I'm so glad that you have mentioned zoning. I worked in the land use department, so I'm familiar with zoning and its restrictions to affordable housing.
Yeah.
And I was wondering whether you have some, advice for people out there, or maybe even a description of how zoning can be a hindrance so that people can understand some of these barriers before I get to Kelley.
There is a thing in the zoning bylaw, you're probably familiar with it, called the Affordable Housing Overlay that encourages developers by allowing for more density. It's never been used, so it hasn't really worked to increase the supply of multifamily units and affordable housing in Acton. The state of Massachusetts, of course, for home ownership programs, includes rental actually, but for higher income residents, the Acton Housing Authority houses residents of 50% of the median income or in the Boston area. The 40B program, you can go up to 80% of median income, so it's a little higher income, allows home ownership. That overrides zoning in Massachusetts. That's been around since the late 70s. So that's a program that is helpful, but again, there's a lot of opposition to 40Bs in Acton. The state encourages it by requiring a minimum 10% of affordable units, or developers can override zoning. I know Bob Van Meter from the Community Housing Corporation has been advocating. Zoning divides areas into, factories or housing. Open up the factory or the manufacturing zoning to allow conversion of some of the older factory buildings in town into affordable housing. That's been very successful in places where old mills and things have been converted. So there are alternatives, but the mindset in Acton is single-family housing, minimum lot sizes, and keep that residential, which has an effect on the affordability for the town.
And even for the 40Bs, the units are usually very expensive for the low-income person.
Yeah.
It has been my observation, but maybe we can have another session to talk about that range of 40Bs. But for now, is there any word you would have for our viewers before we get to Keller Cronin, the manager? Something we haven't talked about that you as a commissioner, maybe it's a plea to the public.
No, I'd just like to thank the town and town meeting for supporting the Housing Authority through the community preservation grants. The CPC committee has been very supportive of the Housing Authority. Now with ARPA money available, the select board, in fact, tonight has on their agenda an item to consider funding the Housing Authority with ARPA money. I am also an associate member of the Green Advisory Board in town, being an environmental advocate. And they are also going to be recommending, well, it's on their agenda tonight, about whether they would recommend to the select board or not use of a fund called the Energy Efficiency Fund in town, which has money from the rental of the solar array at the transfer station and is available for energy improvements. Hopefully, they will recommend that the select board approve expenditures from those funds to purchase new stoves and refrigerators for Acton Housing Authority residents. Again, thank you very much to the town residents who do support the Housing Authority.
Thank you, Peter. It's been an honor speaking with you about housing, and I look forward to hosting you again to tell us more, give us more updates.
All right, thank you.
And with me is Ms. Keller Cronin, who is the Executive Director for the Acton Housing Authority. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vivian.
So how long have you worked with the Housing Authority, and what has it been like?
So I've been the director of the Acton Housing Authority for 16 years. And before that, I was on the board of a local housing authority. And prior to that, I ran the Homeless Commission for the city of Boston. So I've been working on affordable housing issues my whole adult life.
So what trends have you observed over the years you have worked with affordable housing?
That the need just doesn't go away. The waiting lists are long. It's taking longer for people to get housing than it did when I first started. When I first started, we used to tell seniors, so elderly people, that it would take up to about a year for them to get a unit. It takes over 5 years now for them to come to the top of the waiting list. I think that's primarily because people age in place now more than they did when I started. So people used to go into nursing home care or go move in with families, and they don't do that so much anymore. The services come to them so that they can stay in their unit.
Speaking of the need that doesn't go away and the wait times, what is the wait time like in Acton?
Years and years. So some people are unfortunately never going to come to the top of the waiting list. So for families, it takes even longer to get housing. It can take 7 years minimally, unless you're an emergency, unless you're homeless or at risk of homeless because of domestic violence or some kind of fire or flood or something. But it takes a very long time. There's over 100,000 applicants on the statewide waiting list for affordable public housing. Our waiting list is over 6,000, and we only have 37 family public housing units.
Why is that?
So Acton created the Housing Authority in 1970, and our first units were built in 1980, and that's here, 68 Windsor Ave, 68 units of elder disabled housing. And then the next housing units that were built were in 1986 over at Sachem Way. But the state hasn't provided money for new public housing units in decades. We were able to also purchase some condos in the 90s, but since then the state of Massachusetts hasn't put in the budget money for new public housing units.
Why do you think that is?
Well, Massachusetts is one of the only states that actually provides public housing. Connecticut and New York are the other two that have state-funded public housing. The rest of the public housing is funded by the federal government. And all the states, including in Massachusetts, there's federal public housing as well. But they haven't provided new resources either. So there's just not been the supply of affordable housing that's needed. The state actually is going to use some of their ARPA money for new units, but not for public housing units, just affordable housing.
So the 40B type?
Yes, yeah. And some affordable units, like we're trying to build some new units on Main Street.
Right.
So we're submitting our application this week to hopefully be able to provide 41 new units. And we provided 12 new family units over at Sachem Way earlier, which we got mixed financing for, but they're not considered public housing.
So why is it difficult for the state, in your opinion, to provide support for public housing and not 40B?
They're just not prioritizing it. So 40B is privately. They are able to raise the money on their own, the private for-profit organizations, because they only have to provide 25% of their units as affordable. The other 75 are market rate.
Yeah.
All of our units are affordable. And the state just hasn't prioritized 100% affordable housing unit development.
And, can you tell us about some of the challenges you face in the day-to-day management of affordable housing or public housing, and things that we may not know as the public?
Yeah. So one of the challenges that we have is just the funding. So the state level funded housing authorities for about 10 years. So there was no new money as expenses were going up. And they didn't start giving housing authorities money for capital projects. So that's like the modernizing of the buildings and the interiors until about 10 years ago. So for decades, you just had money that you got from rents, but the rents are very low because the residents are very low income. So our average rent is $358 a month. So at the end of the day, after you've paid utilities and condo fees and maintenance staff, there's just not a lot of money.
Did you say $358 a month?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the state public housing program, you pay 30% of your income towards rent, and the majority of our residents are under 30% of median income. You're eligible up to 80%, but the majority of our residents are below 30% of median income.
Wow, that's low.
Yeah. So so there's just not a lot of money from that to pay for interior improvements, exterior improvements. So the Housing Authority has been very aggressive in applying for community preservation funds, for example.
Right.
You can use those funds for exterior, like the preservation of your buildings. So we've gotten money from the town, has been very supportive on the Community Preservation Committee for roofs, doors, windows, siding, those types of things. But you can't use it for the interiors of your buildings because the legislation does not allow affordable housing CPC funds to be used for the maintenance or the rehab of existing housing.
Is there a reason why?
I don't know. It's just the way the legislation was written. Housing authorities would love to see that changed.
Okay.
Because,
that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the need is enormous. So, for example, in our housing, we have 140 state public housing units. And the state has determined that the expired components, meaning the parts of the buildings that are beyond their life expectancy, so to speak, is $7 million. So there's $7 million worth of things that need to be replaced. They give us $150,000 a year to do the modernization. So it would take 44 years just to replace everything that's expired now.
44 years.
Yes, yeah. And then in the meantime, more things will be, past
breaking down
their expired life cycle. So it makes it difficult. It makes it difficult for the residents who live in the units, and they have old appliances, or they have old counters and bathroom fixtures. And it makes it hard for us because if they're older, that means they need more work.
Right.
They have to get fixed more often. And so it's kind of not a very good way economically
Right.
to keep things going, because you have to spend more money to fix things if they're old. And if you could just replace them, then you wouldn't have to spend so much time on the maintenance of them.
Right. And just to go back about, emphasizing the need for affordable housing. I know the Commissioner, Peter Very, talked about the increasing demand. Just to give a better picture of what the demand is like right now, how many people are on your waiting list in Acton?
So our waiting list has 11,000 people on it.
11,000?
Yeah, 11,000 just for the Acton Housing Authority. Of that, about 2,000 is for elderly, about 6,000 is for family, and then the rest are for our disabled units.
And of those, you only have 37.
Right, so I have 37 family public housing units, plus we have 12 family units that we built recently that aren't considered public housing, but they're affordable. And then we have 8 what are called LIP units, Local Initiative Program units. So altogether we have in the family housing, I'm going to get 57 units.
57 units that are available, some of them occupied, and we have 11,000 people on a waiting list.
Right.
Let's just think about that for a moment. And this is where, I want us, it's like a call for action for all of us to advocate for the increase of affordable housing in our communities. Because these are things that we don't realize when we're in the comforts of our home. That we have so much need out there.
Right.
And we are not having enough advocacy to meet this need. So, with that said, what can be done to support the Acton Housing Authority?
So one of the things, the town supported us in building the new units at Whittlesey Village. So those family units and the 8 local initiative units were all supported. So those 20 units were all supported by the town. The town provided community preservation funds. They provided developer funds, so like developers that have to pay the town when they build and they don't use enough affordable units, they have to pay the town some money. And we leveraged state funds for those. So supporting the creation of new units is something people can do. We're trying to build the 41 units of elder disabled housing on Main Street now. We have 91 elder disabled units that we have now, and we want to build 41 new ones. The town has been very supportive at town meeting. They approved the town designating that property for us, and they supported us with community preservation funds. But continuing to support community preservation funds, the town is, as Peter said earlier, they're looking to give us some money so that we can replace some of the appliances.
Through the ARPA funds?
Yes, through ARPA funds and the green environmental funding that they have. But also just being advocates for housing, and advocates at the state level for state funding and federal funds to help create new units. Because the reality is Massachusetts is one of the most expensive communities to live in. Other parts of the country, the rents aren't so high. And the reason why they're so high is there's just not enough units. So supporting whenever people are trying to create new units, being supportive of that, and advocating with legislators and governors and reps and senators.
Right, and of course with our drive for bold action for clean environments and clean energy, how has that interfaced with affordable housing in Acton?
So Acton has really been, I think, on the cutting edge of sustainability. They have a new sustainability director. People in leadership positions have really pushed this issue. So our new units are going to be, there'll be no fossil fuel in those units. It's going to be all electric.
Good to know.
Which has its own issues too. So like here we put in air source heat pumps for our senior housing, which is considered better for the environment as well. but they're very expensive to maintain because you have to clean the filters quarterly, you have to have them serviced annually, the coolant has to be checked. So green energy is a wonderful thing. It can be a little more expensive to manage and pay for up front. So the state has prioritized that. So any new housing that gets built with state funds will have to meet those codes that they created and standards. Yes. But it does make it a little more expensive. But it's obviously a very needed and important thing to do.
Well, Kelley, is there any other thing about the Acton Housing Authority that we haven't mentioned about that you'd like us, to know as a public?
So Amanda's gonna speak about some of the services we provide, so I'm not gonna spend time talking about that. And Lin's gonna talk a little bit about some of the things that we've been trying to do to help some of our linguistic minorities, because we have a lot of people who don't speak English who live in our housing. But we are here. We are a place where people can come and apply for housing. As I just gave the bad news, that doesn't mean when they come and apply, they're going to get a unit right away. But you can't get a unit if you don't apply. So hopefully people will come. We can also explain to them some other places they can go for assistance in the meantime while they're waiting. We only have about 12 units turnover a year.
Right.
So although we have a decent amount of units, we only have a certain amount turnover every year. So that's why our goal is to keep building more housing as we can and to support other efforts to build housing.
On average, what is the percentage of the turnover?
So I'm going to look at my numbers because I wrote them down. So on average, we are seeing a turnover of 6 elderly units a year and 7 family units a year.
Wow, that's not much.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I had just moved here, I came to this office to ask for him to try and get information about affordable housing. So for people like me who might want to learn more about affordable housing, where can they get the resources and the information?
So if they come here, we'll give them the resource, because now we're part of a centralized application system. So if people apply here, they can get on the waiting list for all the housing authorities that they're interested in applying for. We used to be just our own waiting list. So now when they apply, they can apply for Acton, Lowell, Concord, whichever communities they're interested in living in. Okay. And also for the Section 8 waiting list, we're part of a centralized list. So even if they don't get housing through us, they might get it from another agency if they apply. So come to our office so we can make sure that you've applied. And we can also tell you about a couple other agencies that have information like SMOC. If people really are about to become homeless and really don't have a place to live, an agency like that can help them.
And that's 68 Windsor Ave?
Yes.
Is there an email they can?
Yep. The person who runs the waiting list, her email address is waitlist@actonhousing.net.
All right. And it's been an honor having you here.
Thank you, Vivian.
And I look forward to speaking to Amanda and also to hosting you again for regular updates.
Great. Thank you.
Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
What do you do at the Acton Housing Authority, and what services do you provide?
Sure. So I actually fulfill 2 positions at the Acton Housing Authority. So my primary position is called the Family Self-Sufficiency Coordinator. And that's a position that is funded by HUD, by the federal government. And it allows me to run a program for some of our Section 8 voucher holders.
What is Section 8 for our viewers?
Sure. So Section 8 is one of the housing programs that we offer, and it's a federal program. So it allows us to provide subsidies to people who live in the private market. So we don't own the housing. They live in apartments or condos in town or anywhere. And we can provide subsidies to them to lower the cost of their rent. So we have approximately 155 of those vouchers are ours. And I currently have 25 people on the Family Self-Sufficiency Program that I manage. And what that program is, it's a 5-year program that HUD designed. I provide case management for it. So the ultimate goal of the program is for them to increase their household income, which will help them become more self-sufficient. And they have to accomplish certain goals along the way. And when they do that, there's financial incentives.
Okay, well, so can you give us a little bit of examples?
Sure. So just as an example, someone on the Section 8 program, when let's say their household income goes up, their rent's going to go up because we recalculate it because their income is based on their rent. So their rent is going to go up. And if they're on this program, essentially some of that rent increase is matched and put aside into a bank account in their name that they can't touch for 5 years. And so with my help, they accomplish or try to accomplish certain goals along the way, such as finish that class I've been taking at the community college, or obtain my degree, or obtain childcare so I can continue working. It's a variety of goals as long as they're related to improving their circumstances. And so over those 5 years, if they've earned money on that program, then they would receive it as long as they accomplish their goals. So it can accrue to be quite a bit.
And what is the criteria for applying to be a part of this program? In terms of, does one have to be a citizen, a permanent resident? What is that criteria?
No, I mean, they have to be a Section 8 voucher holder. And really the main requirement is just that they want to participate. It's voluntary, it's not required. So they have to be someone that wants to be a part of this. And sometimes it doesn't work out and there's no money earned or no goals accomplished, and that's okay. But a lot of people do. So there's no age requirement. There's no, you don't have to have kids. You don't have to be a citizen, or you just have to be a Section 8 voucher holder through us. And some other housing authorities also receive this funding.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what else would you like to, share with us about this program?
Sure. Well, I mean, the huge thing for the participants that do succeed on this program is just not only the goals that they accomplish, but just that it's really a rare opportunity for a person to save money. And we can't tell the person how to spend that money at the end, but a lot of people use it to pay off debts or to go to school, to pay off tax debts, medical debts, credit card debts, So it really helps. It can help relieve them of burden.
Financial burden.
Yeah.
And how does it tie into the goals for the Acton Housing Authority?
Sure. So, it's really important to us to provide social services to our voucher holders, our residents in general. And so by being able to be a case manager for this program, I make referrals, I help them with their goals. And for instance, right now we're partnering with Budget Buddies out of Bedford, a local nonprofit organization. And we're going to be providing free financial workshops for some of the women on our program.
Okay, cool.
And, I also partner with Mass Hire in Framingham, so any job opportunities we find out about. So it's my job to pass along any pertinent information to them to help them with their goals.
That's exciting.
So it's really just about, connecting them to what it is they need to move forward.
All right.
And I also do another position at Acton Housing, which is funded by Acton Boxborough United Way. And
I'm on the board.
Yeah.
Just for
so that's
disclosure.
amazing. They're amazing.
Yeah.
And it allows me, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to provide any social services to the tenants that live in the housing we own.
So what kind of social services do you provide
Sure.
in addition to the section?
Sure, and it's for families and seniors that live in our housing, and it allows me to just give, any support needed. Really, what I do is a lot of help with applications, so applying for SNAP, otherwise known as food stamps, applying for fuel assistance to bring down the cost of their heating bills, applying for Dolly Atamian camp scholarships for summer activities and camp opportunities for families with younger children.
Week?
Yes.
Also week? Do you help them?
Yes, I do. I can do that. I've helped with mass health applications. And also I have distributed school supplies to families in the past. Every year we coordinate a really big holiday gift program for our families.
That's nice.
And meals for our seniors. So a lot of things like that.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah.
I mean, these are some of the services that sometimes we don't get to know exist because we don't have that information ready. So this is great. Thanks for sharing that information with our viewers.
You're welcome.
And I hope to have more conversations with you and updates from you in coming episodes.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Amanda.
Okay.
And with me is Lin Zhao, who also works at the Acton Housing Authority. Lin, welcome to the show.
Hi everyone, my name is Lin Zhang. I moved to Acton in 2012 with my family. So I joined Acton Housing Authority in 2018 when our director, Miss Kelley Cronin, she's looking for someone to replace Doreen, who was retiring. She was looking for someone, especially, can do the office work and the accounting part of the work, and especially she needs someone to speak Chinese.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why she really wants somebody to speak Chinese and join the Acton Housing Authority, so that we have a 91 senior housing unity here, but more like 30% are around 35
are Chinese.
They are Chinese residents. So they are learning Chinese here. They're learning English here, but they try their best. But they can know the basic English speaking, but for like communication, it's still like a language barrier for them. So upon my joining the Acton Housing Authority, I was able to help them with place the work orders, help them with communicate with office staff on annual lease renewing, and also other, I think part of my role here is I can build the communication with each other.
Yeah.
Except for the help part from the office, they also have language barrier and the cultural part, the different from here. So I think after I joined the housing authority, I try my best to help them with all kind of areas, including their the livings and the situation here, and also I think I help them to get more involved in this community instead of only permanent just living here. We are not only the management here. We are trying to get them involved in the community here. So one thing is we have annual the capital spending meeting. So usually Miss Cronin ask a special meeting for Chinese residents only. So I usually present there to help them translate, to let them know what happening in this community, what kind of thing we are doing here, replace doors and replace something else.
You mean in the housing authority?
Right.
This community
right.
At Windsor. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So that's the part that I think help them to more get more involved in the community, so they can feel more
they belong.
Belong here.
Yes.
Right. So I think that's one part, and also the other part is we want to hear the feedback from them. Previously, it's hard for them to communicate with office staff without translation.
Right.
So we know we want to hear their voice here. We want to get the involvement. So what they want, what they expected, and what they have like areas think we can have more improvement. So I think I have improved this a lot. So I'm really happy to join the housing authority to can be part of the bridge between each other. So also the other part I think so first thing is like the annual capital spending meeting, happen to understand what's going on in the community, how we spending the fund. And so second one is especially last year during the pandemic, it's really hard for them to. Most of even the English-speaking people, I think they feel isolated.
Oh yes,
right.
Everyone.
So for them, it's hard to communicate with, reach out to the not only the community here, the community in the town.
Yeah.
So the senior here, we organize three clinic for the vaccination.
Yeah.
So the seniors really appreciated that, and really appreciate the town of Acton. Put them on the first priority for our seniors to get vaccinated here. Just really happy for that, because it's hard to find vaccination at the beginning.
It's so difficult to navate the
internet.
computers and
It's hard.
It was hard even for me.
Right. So we are really happy we can help them to go through the pandemic and go help them to communicate with with each other.
Right.
It's really, really good. It's really nice to see. So the other things I want to mention about we have got a state funding for created place making in here. So we get a grant can make some improvement in the community. So Kelley organized meetings, constantly communicate with the Chinese residents, want to know what really they want to see happening here.
Right.
What they want to see more in here can let him feel more involved.
Yeah.
That's really important for them.
Yeah.
So that's a part of the thing we're doing here. And also this is one of the notes I just got from the beginning of the new year from the Chinese residents.
Oh.
They said they live here for a long time already, but since they move in, they never heard because of the road, because if the ice, somebody's slippery in here. That's because our maintenance and the staff really put them on first priority. They, whenever have a snowing day, they come as soon as possible, working overnight to get everything, safe for our seniors to working on it. So they really appreciate that. It's called, people here they call them the guardians. It's really nice seeing our staff have a really good relationship with all the residents. We want them not only feel here is not only apartment live here. We want them to feel like a home. It's really nice. That's part of our job. I'm here.
You're doing a great job. Thank you so much for supporting that community.
That's my pleasure. I think it's really nice. I said when I joined here, I said, I'm really lucky to join the housing authority here.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we are all glad to have you in our community.
Thank you.
As Acton. Thank you for everything that you do. And we look forward to hosting you again sometime to just give us some updates on your work.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Lin.
Thank you, Vivian.
And with that, that was it from ActonTV. Thanks for watching this episode of Acton in Focus with the Acton Housing Authority. Till next time.